is a direct sponsor or has been a direct sponsor of the Badlands shows. Most of them are probably people you've met at the Garts and vice versa. So always great when you support those guys.
All right. And with that, I will say good evening, everyone. Welcome to Badlands Story Hour. I'm Chris Paul. That is Burning Bright. And tonight we are discussing the great Godfather Part II, written and directed by Francis Ford Coppola, based on the Mario Puzo books, starring Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Robert Duvall, Diane Keaton, John Cazale as Fredo. Just another fantastic movie. It's one of the best trilogies ever. Godfather 2 is widely seen as one of the greatest movies of all time. A lot of people would just say straight out, this is the greatest movie of all time. Wonderful film. I'll let you kick things off this week because we're kind of trading back on those. And by the way, chat, if you want to do Godfather 3 next week, we are game for that. So put up a 1 if you want to do Godfather 3 next week, and a 2 if you want to move on to some other kind of movie.
Yeah. Obviously did Godfather 1 last week. I had said this might be the trilogy that I haven't seen that stands out. There's obviously plenty of movies we do on Story Hour that one of us hasn't seen, but this is one of the biggies, I think, that is a big gap in film knowledge for me. Really enjoyed Godfather 1, but as much as I praised it last week, I still, while I was watching it, was like, I guess maybe the feeling I had while watching it, 1972 film, was, man, this must have been something in 1972. Mm-hmm. And while I was watching that movie, I was thinking about all of the inspiration movies in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s that I was much more familiar with clearly took from The Godfather. Things I was like objectively very impressed with in that first movie was the oh my god, I'm blanking. Marlon Brando, great. It was great to see those performances, all that stuff. But I think after watching Part 2, even more so, I don't know if I'll revisit Godfather 1. I think it was a good movie. And it deserves its place in history. And then I had heard that Godfather 2 was really, really good and considered one of the best sequels ever. But you never know what that means. It's like, does that just mean it kind of lives up to the legacy of the first one? Does it enhance it? And I was blown away by this one. I think a lot of it's probably just personal taste. But this is one of those sequels for me. Like, I always bring up Lord of the Rings, but it's because it's my favorite trilogy. And I think Lord of the Rings, one of the reasons I love it so much is that the Two Towers feels like it comes out of the same story as the Fellowship of the Ring, but it totally changes the tone. And it just works. And I don't think that's easy to do in movies. Like, you've got a sequel to a movie and you flip the tone. Usually that's very jarring. Usually it gets rejected by audiences. It feels false. It feels weird. And maybe some people, I don't know if this is a consensus or not. For me, I felt like even though they're both, crime stories and they're both dealing with similar subject matter, I thought the tone of Godfather 2 was totally different from Godfather 1. Like, I found it to be, if the first one was almost like a tragic kind of fall of a family, this one to me felt like watching a villain origin story. Like, this was much more of a character piece for me than the first one was. And I know the first one was focused more on Vito on the surface level, because you had Marlon Brando in it, and you had kind of the transfer of power between Vito to Michael by the end of that movie. And obviously this one deals way more with Michael. But this one felt like I learned way more about the motivations of Vito. And it's kind of, I know some people kind of hinted at that, sure, including you last week. I didn't know anything about it. So I didn't know fucking Robert De Niro was in this. And like, that's how little I knew about, apparently, that I knew about this. He blew me away. I loved his
Yeah.
performance as young Vito. And it's funny because I am a real stickler for that. I have a real hard time with movies that show you two actors playing the same character.
Mm.
I think that's one of the really difficult things to do. And I just do. If you had told me on paper, yeah, there's like young Vito in the actually people in chat were saying that last week, and I actually was a little trepidatious about that. I was like, you're telling me that they're going to do a whole storyline of a young Vito following up one of the most iconic performances in American film history by Marlon Brando? I don't know if that's going to work. And it worked for me. I preferred like Robert De Niro in that role. I thought it was really cool. But yeah, anyway, before I ramble the whole show, the tone of it was like a tone piece. I thought Al Pacino was fantastic. I thought De Niro was fantastic. And I thought it was very subtle. Like it's a movie where a lot of big things happen, a lot of big events on the page happen, but I just thought it was all played in a very believable, like human-driven way by all the characters. I can see why this one is super influential. And right before the show, I had said to Chris, I had said it in reverse order. I'd said, this has the DNA of The Dark Knight in it. But really, the better way to say that is the DNA of The Godfather Part II is all throughout The Dark Knight, which is, I would say, in modernity, that's the trilogy. If you're looking for like a modern crime trilogy, I think the only modern crime trilogy is a superhero movie, and that's Nolan's Dark Knight. And clearly, it's now very clear to me that he essentially did the Godfather trilogy, but in a Batman world. But yeah, anyway, before I ramble, it's just good stuff.
I'm interested in hearing you make that case.
Well, I guess in Batman Begins, like on a very macro level, and we did that whole trilogy on Story Hour, you're setting up the world of the Batman, and I think a lot of the heavy lifting for the trilogy is done in Batman Begins. I think The Dark Knight is so good that a lot of people actually underrate what Nolan did with Batman Begins. He creates Gotham City as a character. That's one of the things a lot of comic book fans say that read Batman growing up, that read it in the comics. They say like the directors like Tim Burton, what Tim Burton didn't get is like Gotham City is the character. And like Batman is somebody you follow through Gotham City. But any alley you go down, there's an absolutely intense and interesting dynamic going on between the politicians and the crime families and all that. And The Dark Knight, because the Batman Begins did that heavy lifting, it was able to drill down into the psychology of Bruce Wayne and the Batman character in this world. Like that one, and then he is confronted with an enemy in the Joker that is the first enemy he doesn't understand. So he's come up against something he doesn't understand, and you get this great clash of wills, and you kind of get this not decline, this descent into the darkness by Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight, as he's kind of, he's confronted with this new challenge, and he realizes like it's not enough to just be a really powerful martial artist who has a lot of money. That worked in Batman Begins, but now I've come up against something that requires me to become something else. And that is what I saw in The Godfather 2. Whether it's right or wrong, and that is in The Dark Knight. They play with the idea in The Dark Knight of like, is Batman still the hero in this movie based on a lot of the ways he chooses to fight the villain? And it's more tame than The Godfather. It's obviously a comic book movie, but there's toward the end of The Dark Knight, Lucius Fox, who's kind of his man in the chair.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne basically forces him to spy on everybody in Gotham City all at once and pretty much bestow upon Bruce Wayne all power and all knowledge. And he quits after that and doesn't want to work for him. And I felt like to me, now that I've seen The Godfather 2, I think there was heavy inspiration in basically saying Michael Corleone observed Vito, he observed his father. The first movie set up the world of The Godfather and the crime families and how they deal with each other and the honor systems and all of that. And in this movie, we get to drill down into Michael has decided to take on an enemy that his father never decided to take on, and that enemy is the United States government, essentially. Um, and maybe the Jews or wherever we want to go with that. And I feel like Michael, for better and worse, had to become something different than what his father was in order to take that on. So I just saw a lot of similarities in terms of the macro between that and the Batman trilogy.
Good. I like that. I guess we'll have to revisit that topic next week then, if and the chat was overwhelmingly in favor, so we can just commit to doing that. Sorry to be spoiler alert for our announcement later, but we will just go ahead and do Godfather 3 next week. So I look forward to hearing whether you think that there was significant overlap between the third installment and Batman. Okay. Yeah. I mean, as far as the movie goes, there were people I knew in Los Angeles where every Christmas with their family for their entire lives, they would have sat down and watched the Godfather trilogy the way I'm sure that a lot of people watch the Lord of the Rings trilogies when they're kind of home with the family over the course of a few days, because it's just nostalgic and fun, and it's always entertaining for everybody, leaves you with a good feeling kind of thing. And so that's kind of the environment out there with like movie buffs. Everybody's seen The Godfather a number of times. And I've seen it probably 5 times now. I don't know if I've gone over that, but enough to be pretty familiar with the movie. But, coming to it, I haven't seen it in a few years. And so we talk all the time about how we're coming to these things with new eyes. And some of that was really cool, seeing the interactions with the government and how much of an overlap there was between the mafia and the government, and how inextricable that thing actually was. One of the key relationships with the senator, and we can get into more of this, was the battle between which side of organized crime he's actually on, because even organized crime is competing for the government money and the government's protection, the immunity, I guess, to accountability and enforcement. But let's go even back further than that, because we can get into those elements of the movie later. We talked last week. One of the things I proposed was that we had 2 totally worldly worldviews, ways of life, in competition and on display. And Michael was operating with a foot in both of those worlds. And perhaps we see, as you just said, he has to change into something else. And the something else he changes into is the person that no longer really even hews to the family as his justification for everything else. We talked last week about how there was this, the 2 ends of the spectrum were, are you part of this kind of more honor culture where the family becomes the justification for all of your worldly pursuits, all the crimes, all the immorality and the rest of it? All of that is, but ultimately you have something to work for as well. You don't want to take everything away from that worldview. It just is ultimately worldly, and you're going to go down that path however far you choose to go down, and the family or it's all business is going to be the excuse for however far you believe you need to take it. Because there's always, in a game like this, going to be a next step you have to take, because someone is going to be more resourceful, meaner, smarter. No matter what it is, the competition is going to still increase as you ascend more levels. That's the competition within the party of false decorum, generally, and certainly within organized crime. So the family or the business becomes the justification for everything. Michael wants to be Vito Corleone, just like all his sons want to be Vito. And Sonny, of course, takes kind of the opposite route than Michael. Michael's going to be the reserved, the businessman, the very cold, the very calculating, willing to do anything. Sonny wants the bombast, the big role as the Godfather. Oh, I just get to tell people what to do, and they're going to do it. And so Michael's approach, Sonny goes down, Vito goes down. Now he's really just the head of the family. Oh, he can't make it about just talking about family, because there are all these other things that he has to do. And then he realizes that to do those things well, he's really just going to remove the whole family And
Yeah.
by the end of Godfather 2, the rest of the family is gone. His mother is dead. His wife is gone. He has to kill Fredo because Fredo tried to kill him. His son that was in the womb was literally murdered by his wife, who's now gone, just to make sure that Michael's family line would not continue because Anthony was unfit for that role. So the family's totally gone by the end of this one.
Yeah.
And we see the choice that he's made. And then we see kind of the apex predator in the organized crime game, who's more cold, more calculating, and more like has his hands in more things and more resources to utilize in Hyman Roth. And then I'll just kind of let it go there.
Yeah, I want to get more into Hyman Roth, and definitely I want to get into the abortion of it all, because I think that's certainly one of those things maybe I would have seen a lot differently 10 years ago. But before we get too off track with that, I want to drill down into what you're talking about with the family and the family aspect. Of course, that's a big theme of this movie. Maybe the only movie series that's done family loyalty better than this is the Fast and the Furious with Vin Diesel. It's all about the family. One of the reasons I'd said it, I think, at the start of the show, I was totally blown away by Robert De Niro in this movie. I don't know what it was. I know it was not this over-the-top performance. It's not even a performance where I can like pinpoint, oh, this was this incredible scene, where sometimes there's a performance I see and I'm like, man, like Michael Fassbender in the basement in Inglourious Bastards. I'm like, that's one of my favorite movie scenes in history. So I can nail down, like, that's why I thought that was so impressive. There's not a scene I'm thinking of in this movie for De Niro. It was just his demeanor and the way he played it. And again, the casting and the performance, like, this movie earned, it opens with giving you Vito's backstory and motivation, right? His father has been killed by this drug lord or this crime lord in Italy. His older brother is killed right at the start of the movie. And then his mother is killed right in front of him by this motherfucker. And he's kind of a mute. He's kind of like, they think he's slow. And I liked that. I liked they layered that into it because it just fits so well to me, even with Marlon Brando's kind of odd, infamous portrayal of Vito Corleone, where in the first movie, you certainly get the impression that he's a very cunning guy, or definitely was in his youth, but he has a very odd presence. Like, there's not a lot of movie characters, except for the ones that copy him, that act like that as the boss. He's really soft-spoken, he's got that raspy voice. You maybe get the impression, like, does he even know really what's going on? And then he'll switch it up in that first movie and be like, oh, he knows exactly what's going on, and he's got a plan for how he's going to get out of it. I thought De Niro was like the perfect bridge between the young, maybe lame, like dumb Vito Corleone that they thought was dumb. They thought he was kind of, when I say dumb, I mean in the sort of slow sense of the word, that they think Anthony is, by the way, which I was also thinking of. They're like, yeah, Anthony isn't fit for this. He's like slow. And it's like, okay, well, Vito's family thought he was. And then in New York, we get the whole De Niro Vito story. And to kind of bridge it to what you were saying, I thought just De Niro's portrayal, I bought into this idea that this guy was not at all dumb. He was very observant and he was very intelligent, and especially when it came to understanding people. And he also was not emotional. He didn't do the Sonny type of things. He didn't do what his older brother did in Italy and just react out of emotion. And you see it, I forget the name of the guy, but like the little crime boss on his street in New York, he's observing that guy that's shaking everybody down. And he's observing how everybody is reacting to him. And he's seeing how these power dynamics work. And like, Vito doesn't make a move until he knows what he is doing. Mm-hmm. And I thought just De Niro's portrayal of him was pretty quiet, pretty subtle. you can buy that, like, he's asking questions throughout the first hour of this movie. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Who is this guy? Who is that guy? And you can get that, yeah, around all the guys he's dealing with, he kind of seems like this unassuming, maybe even a little bit slow dude. But in every scene, he's asking them how things work. And he's just downloading the information. Yeah. And again, to bridge to what you were saying about the family, I think the way I had put this in my notes was Vito chases power, in my view, because he observes in his life what power does to people. Like the start of the movie is somebody with power takes his father, takes his brother, and takes his mother for no reason. And in New York, maybe he thinks he's gotten away from that. And then he sees this motherfucker just walking down the streets, shaking everybody down, takes his job in a second order effect because he can, because he has power. Mm-hmm. And Vito, like, I'm not saying that Vito was not a bad guy or anything, but watching the order, I was wrong about that. I was thinking, my prediction last week was like, oh, Vito, like, maybe Vito's motivations weren't very clean. I actually came out of Godfather 2 being like, Vito's the fucking man. And the reason I liked him is because it really felt like, no, Vito became Vito because he saw that his family needed that, and that, like, the people needed that in his area, and that the only way you're going to get through in this world that he grew up in was by having power that you could project against otherwise powerful systems. And to tie this to Michael, I would say the flaw of Michael is that Michael is trying to keep power. Michael is trying to hold on to power. And what is his motivation? Like, Michael's motivation is the family. And as you just said, Michael kills his fucking family. Michael doesn't give a shit about his family. Michael's a psychopath. I mean, Al Pacino is great, and the character is great. I don't know if this is a popular take or not, but he's a horrible guy. There's almost no redeeming qualities to him, in my opinion. He doesn't love his kids. He doesn't love his wife. I mean, she sucks. I wouldn't either. But he wants to hold on to power, and that is his motivator. Where I think the portrayal of Vito is Vito got power because he needed it. Michael just needs power because it was given to him by Vito and because he's a Corleone. Like, who do you think you are saying you're a Corleone, dude? You went over into war, you came back, and your brothers all suck, so you decided that, you know, the family needs you, but you're going to wipe them all out. So and I know that this is not like anything new for anybody, but that's what surprised me. I thought we were going to get maybe this classic case of like, oh, dad wasn't as clean as you thought he was. And dad was a lot more similar to Michael Corleone. My viewing of this was, no, Vito was exactly who Vito portrayed himself to be. And Michael is a very pale shadow of his father. And I think it all wraps up into kind of this biblical theme of the sins of the father refrain, you know, like even if my framing of Vito is fair, of like, he did these things for the right reasons at the beginning. Did he damn his family by making those choices? And, you know, I would say he probably did, but that's kind of where I would draw the line between those two.
Well, he certainly chose a life of crime in New York City. But let's start right at the beginning there. You mentioned what happens to Vito's family. His father stands up to, I think it was Don Chichi.
Yes.
I'm not remembering the name perfectly. But so he stands up to him. The Don has him killed. At the funeral, the older son has like run off and tried to attack this Don, ends up shot dead on the side of a mountain, and they come up to find him. The mother takes little Vito to this Don and asks, please spare my son. This boy is not going to be any threat to you. And then when he refuses, she takes a knife from her clothing and threatens to slice his throat. then gets distracted with Vito running off and tells him to run. And in the meantime, they just shoot her dead, and she doesn't actually get the revenge. So the mother has shown Vito the example. This is how much you have to be willing to sacrifice for your family. So that honor part of it was, and his father died because he wouldn't like bend the knee to this guy. And so he's got these two examples that really motivate.
And his brother.
His path later in life. Yes, and his brother, well, yeah, it's true. Yeah, his brother was going to go try to get revenge for his father. And so he's seen that example and he wants to pass that down to his kids. But for whatever reason, that doesn't work. And maybe it's because he pursued a life of crime. And I guess I would have to think a lot more about that. I'm not saying maybe to hint that I mean that's what it is. I'm saying maybe that's what it is. But then Vito immediately comes into contact, as you said, with this like glad-handing dandy who walks down the street, picking whatever he wants out of people's carts, waving to people like this. I mean, he's making a display of himself. He's making a big show. Everybody says that's the representative of the Black Hand. He comes in, he acts like friends. He tells you owe him 10% more than you did last month, and you're going to hand it over, because behind him somewhere is the threatening thing. They know he's not threatening himself, but he just flaunts how much he can get away with and how everybody is already bent to his will. And because everybody bends to his will, everybody else is going to bend to his will. Everybody knows there's a threat. That means everybody who sees him, who comes to this new, is going to hear. It's like that monkey thing where they talk about the monkeys getting out of the cage every time one comes out. They like spray the monkey with cold water, and then they beat, and then they beat the shit out of him or whatever. And then eventually, like the new monkey that is replaced every time by like 5 turns or whatever it is, all the monkeys know that none of them are allowed to leave the cage, so none of them even try anymore. And so that's what you have with Fanucci until someone is ready to go in and make him an offer he can't refuse. And all that Vito has to do to show that this guy's power is totally abstract is offer him well below the limit and say, maybe I'll pay you later. I mean, I'll pay you later. And he says, hey, you're pretty ballsy. Maybe I'll have work for you in the future. That's an interesting origin story and a pretty astute understanding of how abstract power operates for a foreign immigrant who gets stuffed in the smallpox cage.
Yeah, and I think Don Fanucci, and he was good. Like he was a good example of hamming it up. The dude who was playing him.
He was awesome. Yeah. That was a fantastic performance. Yeah.
Gaston Moskin or Machine. I don't know how you pronounce that, but yeah, great example of like just hamming it up and worked perfectly. He got his white suit, his cigar. And yeah, just the interplay, like the contrast between him and De Niro was just great. Cause you can see De Niro just observing him the whole time and like not striking until he's ready. But I like that you mentioned abstract power. And I think Vito is just this great, we mentioned this a little bit last week with older Vito, but with younger Vito, I think it also holds that Vito has a real solid understanding of both abstract and actual power. And that's a lot of what we talk about. A lot of our shows end up being about power projection. That's eventually where 5th gen warfare analysis will get you. And the Vito versus Don Fanucci sort of microcosm, Vito recognizes he needs both, right? He recognizes that Don Fanucci's power is abstract. And you don't defeat abstract power with abstract power. You defeat abstract power with actual power. And you can only project abstract power if you have actual power. So Vito, even though he kind of, the way I read that scene of him sitting down with Don Fanucci and, you know, like you said, all he has to do is basically make him an offer. He lowballs him. Yeah. And Fanucci just immediately caves, which I was surprised by. I thought he was going to threaten him and then there was going to be this big confrontation. But he caves. and he blinked, right? Like, to me, he blinked to Vito and he demonstrated to Vito, if Don Fanucci actually had the power behind him that he says he had, there is no way he would have allowed Vito to lowball him. Mm-hmm. Because if you allow somebody in this neighborhood to lowball you, then the word's going to get out that you can be lowballed, and then there goes your abstract power. And what can you do if you lose your abstract power? You have to come down on the people. Well, if he doesn't have any power to come down on the people with, besides like some of his goons that are in the local neighborhood, the Black Hand, I don't know what the actual origins is in this movie or if they ever describe it anywhere, but it felt to me like Vito calls his bluff and it's like, I don't think you're the Black Hand. I don't think you have anybody behind you. I think you're just walking around in a nice suit and you've got some local thugs. And right when Fanucci caves, Vito decides to kill him. Like that's what I was, again, Vito really impressed me in this movie. I know it's more about Michael, but I loved the Vito storyline. And that was a big part of it because I just thought he made such great decisions that you don't see in a lot of movies. You usually see in a lot of movies, even with smart characters, they have to be prompted into everything. And even from a writing perspective, like something has to happen in the plot to prompt them to make the next right decision. And in that case, Vito diagnoses, wait a second, this guy does not have any actual power behind him. Because if he did, he wouldn't have allowed me to do what I just did there. And instead of waiting for some other confrontation down the line, he decides, I'm going to kill him. And then he does. And it's like, it turns out once he kills him, there's no consequences for killing him. Once you kill Don Fanucci's dead. And it turns out Don Fanucci didn't have any power. And then the other thing I liked about Vito after that is it felt to me, and this is just an interpretation, but it felt to me like the whole favors thing, in Godfather 1, we definitely see that Vito deals in favors. That's kind of that's the abstract power that he projects. But in this movie, it really came across that the favors for Vito are genuine. They're real. Like when the orange merchant just gives him food, he is genuinely saying, you have helped me. I will help you if you require my help in the future. And you may never require my help. But I think it communicated to me that because of his origin story and, he did a couple favors to the local Italian mob, he hid the guns for them and everything. And then what did they do? They didn't get him, try to get him involved in all this trouble. They were just like, hey, you helped me, I help you. You help me, this is how it works. And they kept going back and forth. And I think he really took to that sort of omerta honor system and said, this works. So this is just what I'm going to do. Where the Don Fanucci version of that is fake. And I would say the Michael Corleone version of that is closer to the Don Fanucci version of that. Even though Michael Corleone has real power, Michael Corleone doesn't think he owes anybody favors. For him, everything is a transaction. And I felt like for Vito, it was not. It was transactional, but it was also honor-based. Vito does do people favors because he knows down the line he's going to get something out of them. Where for Michael, it was all blackmail. And Michael, even in the first movie, at the end of the first movie, Michael breaks promises and contracts constantly throughout these two movies. And I don't recall seeing Vito break a single contract or a single promise that he made with anybody. And I think that's the number one difference between the two of them.
Well, yeah, we talked about the kind of the changing of the guards, the No Country for Old Men aspect of that. And you can really see that this movie's kind of bookended with the sacrifice of Vito's mother at the beginning, and then the self-sacrificing for honor of Frank Pantangeli at the end. And both of those were examples of that culture really standing out, even though Frank had betrayed them before that. But to go back to, first off, Don Francisco is the Don that killed Vito's mother in the early Italian scene. So Don Francisco, not Don Chichi. You talked about Okay, so with Fanucci, after power is transferred, it's a transfer of abstract power. Now, Vito, obviously, um, in killing Fanucci, exercised like that real power there that took his life, but he goes on to just do Fanucci's job in a way that he believes is better. That was his real conceit from the beginning. Oh, this guy is just a dandy. He's a faker. There's no way this guy is what he pretends he is. You can see it, and and he's observed him in action before. And so he understands, well, all it takes to do this job is to pretend to be that guy. Well, I can pretend to be that guy. And I'm also willing to go to lengths that maybe he's not willing to go to. So I could actually just be that guy and do it much better than Fanucci. And it turns out he's right. But when you were describing it, I thought of the Dread Pirate Roberts
Oh yeah.
from Princess Bride. It's like a new one just takes over. And Fanucci, a new Fanucci is ready to take over. Obviously, this is Don Corleone now, not Don Fanucci, but a new one takes over the same racket and does it largely in the same way. And then he involves himself in a number of other businesses, and his career in organized crime takes off from there. But yeah, I mean, he saw that the power was abstract. He saw that he could replace that abstract power with his own abstract power and do it more competently on a real level. And there's the result.
Yeah, and I think where Michael Corleone kind of elevates, you could say elevates on one reading, you could say he descends or devolves on another reading, but he sees the state as he accurately, I would say, diagnoses the state as a higher form of the mafia. And, it's not that Vito didn't understand that. You certainly get some suggestion in the first movie that the older Vito does definitely understand that the government and the police force, all that kind of stuff, are just bigger mafias. And that if you can get in there, your power projection capabilities and then your protection capabilities increase dramatically. So Michael understands this, and, where I can understand what Michael is doing in The Godfather 2, it's fascinating to see him work, because he does seem, he's a real savant with this stuff, like probably better than Vito was. Some of that, I think, as I said, kind of shit on him to say, I think he had fewer moral scruples than his father, like kind of a worse person, which is advantageous if you are trying to elevate yourself in that ultimate party of false decorum, which would be the government. And obviously the second movie starts off with the congressman there, or the senator, kind of him going back and forth with him. And you know in that scene, just like with the guys coming to Vito at the beginning of Godfather 1, that Michael's going to get the better of this senator, because the senator really doesn't understand what he's up against. But one of the notes I'd written down was the word legitimacy gets thrown around a lot in The Godfather 2. It gets said a few times in the first movie, but in the second one, it's a big focus of the first half of the movie. They keep talking about going legit. And it's funny because it's like Michael understands that there's no such thing as legitimacy. And maybe where I would give him some credit and cast some aspersions on Vito is, I think Vito says he had these visions of Michael ascending into these positions. And Vito kept talking about legitimacy in the first movie. Like, my family's going to be legitimate. And I think Michael understands that there was some naivety there, because legitimacy is just the same thing. I think Vito maybe had this idea, like, once you graduate beyond organized crime and you go legit and you get the contracts with the casinos and whatever else it is with the government, you're legit now. And Michael understands there's no such thing as legit. What legit means is you are now recognized by a more powerful mafia than you, which is U.S. Congress. And the government, the state government, whatever this is. So that's where I can kind of give him, I understand where he's coming from a more pragmatic perspective. And they don't operate, another defense of Michael and the way he operates, which is why I think, I can understand why this movie has a lot of, I could probably watch this 5 times and one viewing be like, Michael's such an idiot, and another viewing be like, man, he's a genius. He's doing a great job. I understand why he's doing all this. The other pushback on Vito would be, there is no honor system in state power. None. And that is the fundamental difference between that kind of power, the legitimate power, and the organized crime power in the families that he has dealt with. Not to say that there aren't traitors and there aren't Fredos and there aren't, backstabbings back and forth and dynamics, Game of Thrones being played in organized crime, but there is an honor system. And typically, if you violate that honor system, like Fredo, you are punished. There is no honor system in politics. There's no honor system in Hollywood, which you've talked about. There is only power. There is, where are you in relation to the person above or below you? How do you get there? And how do you keep the person there from coming up to your level? That is what it is. And I think Michael understands that. It doesn't matter if he gets a contract from the senator. He knows it doesn't matter because the senator is just going to squeeze him. What matters is, does the senator have power over him? So he does really understand, I think, how the game works on a much larger scale than Vito did. And I think it does expose some of Vito's naivety of like, oh, we'll just go legit. We'll get big enough. We'll get too big to fail. And we'll get so useful to the state. And Michael understands like, no, man, a senator is just another Don Vito. And he is going to come down on us if he feels threatened by us. So the only way to protect ourselves from that kind of power is for them to be afraid of us. And of course, I think the macro theme of The Godfather 2 is once you start playing that game, there is always a bigger fish. There is always a new threat. Mm-hmm. There is always a new level of power that you need to attain to protect the power that you've already gained.
Yeah, and going back to that scene that we brought up with Michael and Kay from Godfather 1 last week, where she's talking about senators and congressmen and the rest of it, or actually, I think maybe it's Michael that mentions it. He says, my dad is just like a senator or one of these guys. And she said, well, yeah, but they don't have people killed. And he essentially said, these are the same kinds of people. And, you can believe that they don't have people killed because the TV doesn't tell you that. You're led to believe that one thing is crime, the other thing is not crime, but they're ultimately the same. The idea that Michael was going to be moved into one of those positions, there's the easy interpretation and the service interpretation that like Michael didn't want to be part of the crime family and his father didn't want him to be part of the crime family. And usually when these films play that whole thing, oh, I wanted better for you, I wanted a different life for you, it's because like one of them is kind of already damned. He knows he's immoral, but he doesn't want his son to go down the same path. Well, it's a little different when you're in organized crime and you're trying to put someone in the government, because then it's just like, that's my guy on the inside. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's what these families do. And then if you talk about cartels, for instance, which is the same thing, ultimately, they have all sorts of legitimate businesses. They buy hotels, they buy restaurants, bars, nightclubs, whatever it might be, that they can take a stake in that business and then have that be their legit side. Who knows? Maybe they launder money through it. Maybe it just gives them the illusion of legitimacy from the outside. That's what they try to do. And again, the state allows all of those businesses to operate because they have people inside. And the cartel is the enforcement arm. If the politician doesn't do the right thing, well, then the heavy comes in and forces the politician to do the right thing. We hear about, Brian was talking about these things last week with that old claim from Arizona about how the cartels influence Arizona politicians, the elections and the rest of it, whether or not that was going to come up again. And maybe it will, because whether or not that story was legitimate at the time, it's certainly a model that makes sense for how these sorts of things operate. And, we can go back into that if you like, but I just want to note one more thing. You talked about Michael being sometimes it seemed like he was being smart, sometimes it seemed like he was being stupid. And that's if we take his true motivations as projected or as expected for what they would be. But he's done a number of things. One of the first things he said, if not the first thing he said in Godfather 1, was 2K at the scene of his
sister's wedding.
His sister's wedding. He says, "That's my family. That's not me." He's separating himself from the family. And then we see in the flashback where they're around the table, the flashback toward the end of the film where he's with Tom and Sonny and Fredo, he separates himself from the family. He doesn't even bother going in to sing happy birthday to his father because he doesn't want to be part of the family. Instead, he wants to go join the military, create a life for himself outside of the family, and defies the wishes of the family just so he can make it clear, I'm not part of what you're doing. And so there are a number of times that it seems like he is actively working to destroy the family because I don't know, he's like self-hating about this thing. He wants to have respect from the outside world. He represents the changing of that guard. And so he's not interested in doing things the old-fashioned way. You can see how that plays out with Pantangeli when he tries to go after the Rosado brothers. So does Michael want to destroy the family so that it can just be Michael, the casino owner, Michael, the business owner, Michael, maybe the politician or political influencer or whatever it is, because he's just moved beyond the family?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why I thought of it, but with The Dark Knight on the mind, there's so many great quotes in that movie, but one of them out of Heath Ledger's Joker, he says he's being asked about his motivations by Bruce Wayne, who normally doesn't ask anybody for their motivations. It's one of the little callbacks to the comic books is Bruce Wayne only asks one of his enemies why they are doing what they're doing, and that is the Joker. Typically, he does not care. He doesn't ask. He just stops them from whatever they're doing. But when he asks the Joker, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And he says, I'm like a dog chasing a bus. If I caught up to it, I wouldn't even know what to do. And like that is what I think of with Michael Corleone in this. He's very clever. He's very intelligent. I think Bay Theater Dave in there said Michael was a high-functioning sociopath, in my opinion. And that's really what I come away from this. Not that I think it's simple in that way or meant to be simple, but I don't think Michael has an end game. I think Michael's end game is an end game. I think he wants to win. And it's just that kind of that classic, I can see why this series, especially this pair of movies, I sort of, the theme of it has kind of seeped into American culture. Even for people like me who have not seen these movies, they're referenced so often from a thematic level of like seeking power and where does it ultimately leave you? It's certainly not a new, even what's the movie? Citizen Kane, explored a lot of this stuff before this movie of like, you got all the power in the world, where did it leave you, right? That's nothing new. But with Michael, I think there's this like obsessive hunger to win. Like he has to win every exchange he is in. And another thing I just thought of, I think one of the more strange and interesting dynamics in both movies, and definitely in this one, is the relationship between Michael Corleone and Tom. And I don't have a strong read on it, but I guess, there's a scene toward the end where Michael says a bunch of shitty things to Tom, like he makes some reference to that Tom was offered a deal against the family, and Tom's like, yeah, I didn't take it. Am I supposed to tell you every deal? There's that great scene you put in the clips package between Tom and Pacino that I thought was great in terms of just like the courtiers, the advisors to the old emperor standing there and being like, man, look how the empire has fallen. But Tom's always been that guy that like survives every succession. And there is clearly this real hatred, I feel like, from Michael to Tom, and maybe from Tom to Michael. And I think that's one of the more interesting dynamics that kind of cuts to the themes of Michael Corleone in this series. Because for me, where I took it was Michael sees Tom as like the son Vito wanted, and Tom sees Michael as the son Vito didn't deserve. Like, Tom is a way better son to Vito than Michael Corleone is. He is smarter than Michael Corleone. He understands the honor system better. He's not reckless. He does everything in the interest of the family. He's loyal. He can be trusted. Michael can't be trusted. He's not loyal. He breaks contracts. He doesn't care about the family. He destroys his family. He thinks he's really smart, but he picks fights with really powerful Jews and, whatever. Maybe he's smart because he wins at the end. But I don't know if that's like the popular reading from it, but I was sitting there going, and I will respect also the writing of these movies and the directing and everything. They don't feel the need to tell you, right? Like when they had that little scene and Tom says, "Why do you hurt me, Michael? All I've ever done is be loyal to you and your family." And they just move on. They don't ever address it. It's never, and so many modern movies would have been like, we got to have a button scene on that where we find out why Michael does this. And I appreciated the restraint because it left me after the movie being like, why did he treat Tom that way? Does he know something about Tom that we don't know? Was Tom double dealing or something? Maybe that's the case. But that's kind of how I took it, is that there's always been this dynamic that Michael doesn't like that Tom's at the family table. I think even that scene you referenced, the ending to The Godfather 2, Tom is at the dinner table for Vito's birthday and goes and sings happy birthday, right? So even in that scene, Tom goes and joins the family. And it's very clear that Tom is a part of the family in every way that really matters. And the only thing that gives Michael an into the family is the fact that he was born to them.
Well, that's true. Yes. Tom, the explanation, I could be wrong about this. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but it seemed to me that like Michael thought Tom was going out and taking meetings and seeking another role because he wanted to leave and was kind of setting up his parachute out of that situation,
which might have been true.
So, and so then Michael would have taken that more seriously and gone harder on him to see how he would react. So I thought that was maybe a resolution for that. I don't know. The thing about the Joker, I think, is really interesting. And I don't know if we talked about this when we did Dark Knight back in the day, but so the Joker is different than the run-of-the-mill criminals that Batman is taking off the street, who are motivated by some level of greed or one of their other vices or power or reputation and status and the rest of it. The Joker doesn't want any of those things. The Joker is attached at a much deeper level to like the base layer, like shadow form of humanity. He's down on the bottom. He knows what the nitty gritty is, and he works down there rather than up on this other surface level where you just exercise power over the ones with less power than you. You take their power, someone else does it to you, and you kind of work your way up the chain if you can. That's not how people in the real layer operate, because it's not all ultimately about reputation. But at the same time, the Joker is one of those nihilists. So he's down there, he sees the darkness, and then he just doesn't, there's no escape. None of this has any meaning. So what I'm going to do is rub all of this shit in all of these people's faces. And that is its own motivation, but it's also the kind of thing where if you win, there's nothing else, there's nowhere else to go from there. And so it's like a fight that you don't even really care about. You see what the injustice is, and then you just want to harm all those people and don't want a step after that. And so maybe there's some of that here as well.
Well, another note on the Joker is that I believe it's the last line of Heath Ledger in any movie, but certainly in that one, when Batman captures him, it's not actually the end of the movie. There's like another 20 minutes of resolution beyond when he quote unquote defeats the Joker. But the Joker says, we're destined to do this dance. You and I are destined to do this dance for a long time, I think. And he says, Batman's like, no, you're
Forever.
a freak. You're going to prison, whatever. And the Joker says, you complete me. And, you know, I think a lot of people take that as like, he's a psychopath. He's like, what a creepy thing to say. But what you just said, like, Joker means that. Yeah. And Joker in the comics has this real fascination with Bruce because I think he recognizes, like, Joker gets off on this idea of, as you said, Joker's that gaze into the abyss, become the abyss, make everybody else gaze into the abyss. Bad guys, good guys, everybody's the same. And I'm going to prove that. But Bruce isn't the same. And when Joker tries to make Bruce look into the abyss, Bruce always does the right thing. And he has no motivation to do it. He's actually usually motivated against doing it. And of course, we just see this in one movie, in the Christopher Nolan movie, but in the comic books, there's this wide history of all these stories of them doing this dance. And every time Joker's trying to he's not trying to defeat Batman. He's trying to get Batman to break his moral code. That is what he's after. There are many situations when he could kill him, but he chooses not to because killing Batman doesn't do anything. He wants to get Bruce to compromise his morals, and that's the thing he can never get him to do. So it's kind of like, it's almost like the reason the Joker is after Bruce is because Bruce disproves the nihilist thesis. Because Bruce is a man who exists in a dark world, but is a good man because he has morals and principles, and he'll die with them. And I think there's a lot of analogs in The Godfather. I don't think you have a Bruce Wayne in The Godfather, but you definitely have that same sort of thing where it's like, what is Michael's endgame here? And I think you can see whether, you know, Tom might be the easiest sort of cipher for the audience to kind of look at Michael. I think they try it with Kay. We can get into why I don't think that works. And it's not just because Diane Keaton is beyond awful in these movies, in my opinion. But, there's also more revelations about her. But you don't really have anyone in this movie who acts as a clean moral cipher through which to view Michael. Tom might be the closest, but even to your point, Tom probably does have his deals set up, and he's always looking for what's going to keep everybody in the best position. But it's not like he's a good guy either. So you also look at that from a biblical level and a nature versus nurture level, and you're like, did Michael come out this way? Or was there any possible way to be raised in the empire that Vito Corleone constructed and to not have your son end up this way?
One other thing about Bruce Wayne before we have to stop for a little commercial break here. Like the Joker, Bruce also was not unimpressed. Maybe that's not the right way to say it. So Bruce already had all the things. He's already rich. He's already powerful. He's already good looking. He's had the women. He has the cars. He has everything that anyone could ever want. And still he's willing to give all that stuff up and fight anyway for the city. So that's like the kind of opposite of one level. Basically, that's the positive response to the situation, and the Joker is the negative response. But they both kind of inhabit that same part of reality where they're not impressed with and not consumed with that other more fabricated layer. Guys, if you are watching or listening on Rumble, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up. Theoretically, that helps us. And then also we have a couple of quick words from, it's really just from us. But we do have a brand new spot from Soft Disclosure, and they debuted it last night on Devolution Power Hour. Hilarious.
Pretty good.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
He changed his shirt 3 times before he left. Tried on a smile that didn't
Everybody
fit
saved.
Everybody else like they
Even me.
Especially you.
Suddenly
You mean I just have to use a promo code to get the discount?
BB truly is an idiot.
He had to earn it anyway. Come as you are. That's who we're waiting for. You don't need a different face walking through that door. Come as you are. You run up from the start. Self-disclosures for
Hi, fellas. What year is it?
soft disclosures for everybody.
The soft disclosure extended universe. We never knew.
That's insane. Yeah, I mean, and then how it just cuts over to switches songs, cuts over to Zach, not in black face, but in black hair.
We call that Fast and Furious face, I think. Yeah.
Amazing.
Something.
All right, guys. Well, if you want to hang out with the people in that ad and the people in the other Badlands soft disclosure ads, and also me and some other people, join us in Deadwood, South Dakota. 2 weeks from tonight, we kick it off. June 25th through 28th. All of us will be there. Badlandsmedia.tv/events is where you can go to get your live in-person tickets or your virtual tickets, which allow you to watch the entire conference, participate in the Badlands GART Telegram chat, and you can attend the live streams that we do leading up to GART. And we just did another one of those this afternoon, and there'll be one more next Thursday, a week before we go kick it off. So we'll have some great conversations. It's always like a nice little Badlands field trip. You get to kind of just see everybody that has come over the last few years, new people at each one of these, meet some people that you've talked with in the chats and on the internet. It's always a great time.
Good stuff. I can't believe it's
Badlandsmedia.tv/events. Yeah, 2 weeks. I just got my plane ticket today, and
I'm hitting the cigar lounge this time.
Yes.
Tried to hit it last time, but
yeah,
hitting it this time.
I didn't hit it last year. I hit it the first year with old Snowcat operator. I don't know if he's in the chat tonight, but
I think he's coming.
Yeah, so cool. All right, great. Well, we will do that again. That'll be fun. Okay, so let's get back into some of the other non-family stuff in The Godfather 2 and the relationship in particular with Hyman Roth. So Hyman Roth is modeled on Meyer Lansky, who was a real mobster, Jewish mafia figure in the Prohibition era and on. He was a character in HBO's Boardwalk Empire, pretty key role in that for multiple seasons. And this is, I think, pretty incredible, revelatory of kind of the political model back then. I think, and the reason just to recall, I mentioned this last week, the reason I wanted to do the Godfather films right now is because we're about to get into the rerun of some of this stuff with the whole Cuba thing. And one of Hyman Roth's really interesting remarks in his speech there, I had those two scenes in here where he's speaking specifically about their relationship with the Cuban government. He talks about how they've been rebelling down there for 50 years. And this is, I think, 1958 when all this is going down. Oh, yeah, it's the end of 58. The New Year's Eve from 58 into 59 is when the revolution kicked off, and then Castro took over. And then that whole scene was, or that whole thing was, people have different feelings about these things. Yeah. But it seems like that was an attempt to install someone who was portrayed as a nationalist, but was actually not a nationalist or someone who was going to be fighting for the people at all, just going to be your run-of-the-mill communist. And I guess we can kind of sort that out as we see how this process evolves whenever Trump decides to end the Iran thing and go begin the Cuba thing. We will probably get a full reenactment of this historical period so that we can kind of understand these past events a little better. But the government he's talking about is the government under Batista, And so he has relationships with these American oligarchs, with organized crime, with a number of different business interests, hotel and tourism industry, the casino industry, the nightclub industry. All of these things are flowing into Cuba. The promise to the people is, oh, you're going to have all this money and wealth, this Western investment. All of this is coming in. And, you know, it's not all that different than the Gaza boardwalk. What are we calling that?
The Riviera.
Riviera. There we go. And so I think you can see a parallel there. But really, it's just about organized crime has this relationship with the friendly government here. And you've got Hyman Roth on the side of the, it's like they figured it out first. And by they, I mean the Jews. And by figuring it out first means before the Italian mafia.
Yep. Yeah, I picked up all of that. There was one aspect of it that did confuse me a bit on this first viewing. I don't know if I was thinking too much about what was going on in Cuba. One of the credits to Michael in this movie, I think that works really well. It's also another thing that is mirrored in The Dark Knight of all these double crosses. Mm-hmm. But I think they were definitely aping Godfather 2 in that. Michael seems to be one step ahead of everybody that's trying to double cross him throughout this. He's got a real eye for it. He knows where the pressure points are, and he knows where people think his pressure points are. Hyman Roth is definitely one of these. And, you know, we're shown in the early Cuba scenes that, like the one you played, Michael has trepidations about the investment in Cuba. And he brings up this anecdote about the rebels seem to be really serious. And that's the type of thing that tends to work over time. I had this feeling that Michael was calling bullshit on Hyman Roth. I don't know if that's like an obvious interpretation or not, but that Roth was actually actively working against all of those other guys in the deal, right? Is that the right interpretation? Because
it seems to me like he was working against Michael Corleone because he knows that Michael was responsible for killing Mo Green, who he then gives him the speech at toward the later parts of the movie. He said, Mo Green stood this city up in the desert. He was a great man. He got shot through the face, and he didn't even put like a plaque to commemorate him in Las Vegas. And so, I think that he was basically, they said that he's died from the same heart attack for the last 20 years. So he makes this big promise to Michael because he wants Michael's $2,000 in cash, or sorry, $2 million in cash. And he's going to take that money from Michael Corleone, knowing that in a pretty short period of time, the government's going to be overthrown. Right. We're not going to have that friendly government relationship. And who knows if he uses his political contact in Las Vegas, the senator, the very same senator, to destroy Michael, taking him down, like leave Michael holding the bag in Cuba as the government turns over.
That's definitely... Yeah, that's what I was picking up. I mean, I think it was pretty obvious that he was trying to fuck around with Michael, but the deeper layer to it was what you just said, is that it felt to me like Hyman Roth was very well aware that the rebels were going to win and that was his endgame, and that what he was really mad about Michael is that Michael figured that out and knew that that's what was happening, called the game ahead of time. But yeah, that was all well done. And that's probably like the enemy that is portrayed as the most formidable kind of enemy to Michael in this movie. And even him, he sort of, I guess I shouldn't say easily overcomes him, but he really does know what Hyman Roth is up to pretty much the whole time. And I thought there was I can't think of the specific lines and everything, but there's a few scenes in this movie where he goes to, whether it's Fredo or this guy or that guy, Michael does, he kind of sends people on these errands and he always tells them to represent themselves a certain way. And it's like he's always a few layers ahead of them, like a few steps ahead of them, where it's like he's always sending somebody out on a mission, but the test is really on the guy that's being sent on the mission. and it kind of compounds, and he's this information like Michael understands that the real power, if his father was focused on favors, is like the real power projection type of thing. If you get enough people in different positions to owe you favors, you're protected, you're powerful. And Michael's version of that is if you have enough information on everybody, then you're going to be in the ultimate power position. And he learns as much as he can about everybody he could be dealing with. And then he kind of sets them all on collision courses with each other to see how they're all going to act. I also thought, speaking of subtle writing, like the way Fredo gives himself away to Michael, they make it very obvious in that scene in the sort of theater house, the sex club or whatever, that he's given himself away. But I didn't even understand how he had given himself away, and I had to like look it up. Like I paused it, and I was like, okay, clearly he's just given himself away, but I don't understand how. And looked it up and was like, oh, it was like this. I think a lot of movies are way more obvious about it, where they're like, oh, he said this stupid thing. Obviously, he just told this guy he did it. He told him it was him. And it wasn't like that. All he did was say like, oh yeah, I was here a couple weeks ago with this guy. And I hadn't remembered that in a couple scenes previous, he had said, oh, I haven't met that guy or whatever. And, you know, again, this is one of those examples where you're like information. And Michael is the guy standing there with the most information at all times. And right when that contradiction hits him in this arena, he immediately reorganized. Like you can see the map shift in his mind, and he's like, here it is. That's like a credit to him and a credit to his intellect. And then maybe on the other side, the scary and dark thing about him is that he's like, all right, so Fredo's I'm going to kill my brother now, I guess. I figured, I didn't know for sure that he killed Fredo. I assumed he did because the Fredo, in this audience, like the Fredo thing is very well known because what's his name? Chris Cuomo was famously called Fredo. So that I get that reference a lot more now of why Chris was so upset about being called Fredo by that random guy one time 10 years ago. But yeah, I guess at the end of the movie, I was like, man, I would have thought he would have killed him like back in Cuba or in Vegas or something. And he just waits so long.
He waited until the mother died.
Yeah.
You know, in the first film, he tells Fredo never to go against the family.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got Michael going against the family throughout this film. And the first scene is Pantangeli. It's like that's going against the family because Pantangeli, while not being a Corleone, is like lower in the family. He's part of that same family tree insofar as the Corleone family is that's what it is. The Don is the godfather of all these people.
Yeah.
I know that Vito is the godfather. I understand.
Yeah.
So he tells Fredo to never go against the family. Then he goes against the family. As far as killing Fredo, there's the knowing look when he hugs Fredo at the end. That's basically the kiss of death. He looks over at I think it's Rocco, the guy's name is, who takes care of those sorts of things for him, and he knows at that point this is time to kill Fredo. Fredo tried to have him killed, or at least he participated in the killing, and Fredo basically cops to it in the scene with Michael where he's all sprawled out on that recliner, I guess drunk or whatever, and he says, I was passed over. I want respect. I'm smart. I want respect. Now, everything he has done indicates he's actually not deserving of Michael's respect in any way, but he thought it was messed up that the little brother was always taking care of the big brother and telling him what to do. That's not the right order of things, but Fredo's just not that guy. So you can imagine that he was approached by Johnny Ola, and admitting that he knows Johnny Ola was what gave him away, but he's approached by Johnny Ola. Johnny Ola's working for Hyman Roth. Hyman Roth is on the side of that senator. And so Fredo is the one who has brought the possibility of that killing into Michael's home. And so that's why he says, you know, you broke my heart because you wanted to take the family because you thought you could deserve it, even though you know you can't run it. because these guys told you, now, you know what? We don't want Michael in the picture because we're going to take over the whole business. But I'll tell you what, you're going to be Don of the Corleone family at that point. And that is, I guess, enough for Fredo.
Yeah.
I suppose we can move on from that. One thing I want to make sure to mention, I thought this was such a great line, and it's kind of along the same lines, but Michael and the senator, when they are discussing their business in that first scene, Michael says they are both part of the same hypocrisy. And I just thought that was fantastic. And I'll pass it off to you there.
Yeah. Another angle to change tacks is the abortion of it all. I had no idea that was coming. You mentioned it earlier, but I don't know. I sometimes after I watch these movies, like I subject myself to the intelligentsia of Hollywood and read what the critics believed or wrote about these things. And, they were maybe less ideological than they are in this era, where they're very they're going to put anti-Trump rhetoric right in their movie reviews now. They maybe didn't do that quite as much in the 70s. But you can still see where the propagandist leanings are. And in this movie, I was reading a lot of stuff at the time that was talking about, Kay and her choice in this movie, and really framing this as this feminist thing. Sure. And man, I guess this is just one of those post-awakening eyes, I think, subjects where it's so astounding to me that could be the interpretation of what's going on there, or maybe even the intention. I don't know if it's the intention of what's going on there from a writing perspective or directing perspective, but the idea, I've given Michael Corleone a lot of shit, but where I can have his back is the idea that it was controversial that he punched his wife in the jaw after that scene is astounding and absurd. And I like that he gives her a Superman. I mean, it's such a well-played scene by Pacino. And just, of course, now that I have a kid, it definitely hits you different, and it hits me different not being a liberal anymore and kind of indoctrinated. Not that I was ever ideological about abortion, but I think I just did the whatever, I don't know, women's rights, that sort of thing when I was a teenager. And now it's just such a visceral thing. And especially the way it's delivered too. It's not even like they try to pass it off as the typical pro-abortion propaganda we get, which is I had no choice. It was an act of desperation. I didn't have the money, whatever. Still no excuse. But Kay is I killed that thing because I hated it. And I hate you, and I wanted to end your family line. The fact that she is allowed to live is such a gift to her in the context of this world that we're presented with and this character of Michael Corleone that, it shouldn't surprise me, but it was astounding to me reading critics at the time that found that problematic. And it's you don't find it problematic that she murdered her baby out of spite for her husband? You find it problematic that he was upset about that? So anyway, that's very dark scene. But I thought the added layer to it was just that as much as we think maybe each generation that gets that really starts caring about things and how can we make things better and starts caring about morality and maybe spirituality and whatever, they think man, we've really fallen, and it was really so much better at this point in time, in the before times. And then you look at a 1974 movie and they're yeah, kill that motherfucking baby to stick it to the man. And you're holy shit, we have been in a fallen society for a long time. And I know that this is nothing new. I know the women's whole bullshit movement started really accelerated in the 60s. But it's, man, maybe the feminist propaganda was even worse in the 60s and 70s than it is now. It's just more cartoonish and gay in the era I grew up in, where they go to parades and do stupid shit. Where back in the 60s and 70s, they were just getting naked and going to concerts. But all of them were killing their kids. So nothing new under the sun, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to sell free love, this is the other side of that equation, I
Yep.
suppose, ultimately. Just to track back to Hyman Roth for a second and the senator, I wonder if there's something to be said for the idea that they believe, and I mean, the senator said it quite clearly. And then the reason I put his speech in the hearing about Italians into the clip package is because he's saying about Italians the very same thing that people say about blacks now. And I don't think that that's coincidental. And you look at where the organized crime is when you're talking about criminal gangs in America. For a good long while there, it was urban black populations. Now it's
Yeah.
like Mexican and Central American and South American immigrants from all around the world. And
They're all
whatever.
darkies, Chris. It's all
Right, exactly. But the we're a Judeo-Christian nation, and
yes.
so the tie-ins there have been a much more long-lasting part of American life, perhaps. And I thought it was interesting that Hyman Roth took responsibility for Vito Corleone's success. To Michael, he was basically saying, I kind of made your father. We did a lot of business together. We made a lot of money together. One thing people always say is Hyman Roth makes money for his partners. And he's treating Michael Corleone like a junior partner. He doesn't really want him in there, doesn't want the look of it or anything. And I imagine, as I said earlier, the speech on the balcony was just to get Michael feeling like there was a lot of loyalty here. There's going to be this surefire future payoff for the $2 million he's about to spend. Hyman Roth tells him we're bigger than U.S. Steel. And that really tells you something about the power that Hyman Roth really does throw around in terms of his political relationships and the rest of it.
Yeah, and I'm no expert on the Jews. I don't even necessarily know what one is. I've been saying that for a while. And
No one does.
Nobody does, including them, it seems.
Yeah.
But they seem to know when they are a Jew or who is a Jew in relation to them. But there does seem to be this dynamic at play that most people have observed, that they definitely have each other's backs and they do each other favors. And they're very well versed in abstract power projection. And when you're talking about criminal mafias, it's sort of like this backstop. One of the big themes, obviously, of the Godfather series is the family, and whether that's literal or, as you said earlier, like it's the structure. It's sort of, as I said last week, it's not just this loyalty thing. It's more of a framework. It's like this foundational layer that you can retreat back and all your dealings are double crosses. But if everybody kind of hits this foundational layer, the more and more they step back or violate rules, it kind of keeps everybody building from the same foundation. And the funny thing about the whole Jew topic, especially that's very top of mind in society right now, given the Middle Eastern theater and Donald Trump and accusations of him being the most Zionist ever or the most anti-Zionist ever, this topic is getting back into the zeitgeist. And what's kind of funny about it is, like, Jews right now, whether they're, prominent Jews, they don't really shy away from that at all. They don't shy away from the prospect that, like, we consider ourselves different from all of you. And, like, we consider our nation different than all of you. We were oppressed in a way that we claim is different from all of you, and so we have these privileges that you do not have. And I guess the only reason I don't think they act in a unique manner to many of these other in-groups. You talked about the Italian mafia. There's the Irish mob in the Boston area, New York, and they had their own kind of code, same kind of thing. And when the Irish came over, we were discussing gangs in New York, like it was anti-Irish sentiment at that time, like right at the advent of the Civil War, Irish and Scottish, that sort of thing. And then it was the Italians, and then on and on. But maybe the difference is that the you don't really see them admit it to that level like the Jews do, where they're just like, yeah, we keep to our own, we do each other favors, and like we're different from all of you. I don't know. Maybe the other groups do this, but you're getting a rerun even of this, or not a rerun, but an amplification of this in Europe right now, which I've had my eye on. And for a couple of years, I've kind of laid out a macro theory that if we get some kind of awakening worldwide framework based on just how our societies function, for as many problems we talk about with the US government and the reason we do a lot of the shows we do, I have had a hard time seeing how Europe gets out of the mess they're in without something much more serious going on in their populations compared to us. And I think you're beginning to see you're seeing the beginnings of that right now in England and in Ireland and Northern Ireland. Ireland, it happens to be, Somalis and Northern Africans and stuff, right? But it's the same playbook. It's like it's always the same framework where some elite group imports some other group, and that other group starts to be rampant criminals to the native group. The native group gets very upset by this, and then you have this change. And maybe I'm being biased because it's modernity, but I would say it feels different to me than the Italians, the Irish, and all this. As you said, the Italians were a bunch of criminals when they came over. The Irish were a bunch of criminals, right? But they did assimilate into American society. Like, they did build businesses. They wanted a part of the American dream. They defended the American dream after that. Whatever you think of that, the Hungarians did it. The Germans did it. The English did it. The only people who don't do it is the Africans and the Middle Easterners. I think you're seeing like the end game of this dialectic. I think we have reached the end game of this globalist experiment because assimilation can work if you are dealing with macro cultures that have foundational ideals that are similar. Mm-hmm. And as much as the Irish are different from the Italians, and the Italians are different from the English, and the English are different from the Germans, they're all Western men. And they can kind of figure out each other's honor codes. But they are not Somali men. And I think that's why it's being amplified so much right now, and that I do not see like a good off-ramp of this kind of thing. You're not going to get like the Somalis who start building honest businesses in Belfast, in my view. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, there's Hyman Roths all over the board, I think, behind a lot of these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how the system operates. Yeah. I thought it was funny at the beginning when they're at Ellis Island and they put him in a 3-month quarantine for smallpox. The beautiful migrant housing they have, all I could think was, wow, the government was importing foreign slaves and putting them up in comfortable housing since way back. Yeah. 2 quick notes before we get out of here. I just thought 2 great lines. Michael, when he's talking to Tom and telling him that I'm going to make you the Don, he said, all these people that work for me, I know why they work for me. This is all business to them. It's not about loyalty. It's just about business. They protect me because I pay them a lot of money to protect me. And if somebody else is going to pay them more money to stop protecting me for a while someone shoots up my house, well, they're going to take that money too. And he said, what you have to do is think as people around you think. And I think that that's a good lesson for everyone always. Not everybody is operating on the same incentive structure. They're not operating from the same motivations or according to the same morality and principles. And it's important to understand who, like the people close to you, like on what base, if you're in Michael's position, obviously on what basis they are acting. But it's important in business relationships. It's important when discerning whether or not someone can be a trusted friend and the rest of it. You really have to not think about if you were just doing the things that they were doing and making the decisions, but really doing all of that in the person of them. Like, what is this person actually thinking? And so I thought that was great, the way they put that out there. And then the line, I was going to put it in, but the version I was clipping didn't have the subtitles displayed for the Italian. When he tells his mother he thinks that he's losing his family she said, "Oh, you could never lose your family." And he said, "Well, times are changing." And I thought it was interesting because, again, in the first one, he wanted to lose his family, and her answer would have been very appropriate there. "Sorry, buddy, you're not going to be able to do that no matter how hard you try."
Yeah, well, even the way I sort of took that as well to go one step further is we've talked a lot in these two movie discussions about power projection again, and specifically abstract power. And in that scene, it was making me think Michael has given what he ends up doing with the family and what he has done even leading up to that scene with his mother. Obviously, he follows that up with Fredo. It's almost like Michael has made an abstraction out of the family. Like for Michael, there's this justification possible as long as you are doing everything in the interest of the family. And to Michael, it's like, well, what is the family? It's the business, and it's the system. It's the system you've created. It's the rules. And, we talk about that a lot. One of the things I talk about in geopolitics, and I write about it a lot, is we talk about the deep state and the globalists and the collectivists and whatever. But one of the greatest ways they're described, and that they describe themselves, is the rules-based international order. And I always think that that's kind of a funny tongue-in-cheek way for the enemy to describe themselves, because they pretty much lay it out there. They're like, oh, no, we didn't say we're the good guys. We said we are the rules-based international order. We are a powerful group of nations who operate along a certain rule set that we all follow, and we will project that rule set onto everybody and anybody and everybody that we can project this rule set onto. And maybe for the first time in our lifetimes, that rules-based international order is being challenged by a rising order, Russia, China, perhaps America, breaking away from that rules-based order that they have not been challenged with before. The micro is the macro. I think in this kind of series, we're seeing that Michael understands that on a base level, but the whole family thing and the losing of the family and him contributing to the losing of the family, to me, it's kind of this, at the heart of this series is the thing he's forgotten maybe, or the thing he never had that Vito had, was this understanding of like, no, there is something there. There is something valuable and worth cherishing outside of human conditions and love and loyalty to family. There is something to a code of honor and loyalty to family that Michael does not understand, that Vito did understand. And as I said last week, Ghost and I talk about that when it comes to honor culture. Like these leaders in this new, what I call the Sovereign Alliance, seem to be able to deal with each other without signing contracts, because they are not part of the rules-based international order. They're just dealing with each other on honest terms. As you just said, what does China want? What does America want? Why don't we just say that to each other, and then we can figure this out, instead of saying, well, these are the rules that we all have to follow. So I think Michael is just playing by the rules, but Vito understood that, there's a lot more to it.
All right, guys, I guess this is probably, unless you have any notes that you want to, anything else you want to hit. Okay, great. So we will leave it there. I know I saw AJC drop some subscriptions in the chat earlier. So thank you very much, sir. Yes. And
we have a couple boosts I can grab as well.
Oh, we do. Okay, cool.
From last week, we had Team Smooth sent $50 over and said underrated and under-ranted. Thank you very much, Team Smooth. We do understand times are squeezed out there. We know the rants and the boosts aren't always easy to come by, but we very much appreciate when you guys shoot it over. And if you do it on delay, then we'll get to them next week. And then we also had Beata Girl, who sent $100 over. Two of my favorite TV characters, Burning Bright and Chris Paul, and one of my favorite films, The Godfather. Does it get any better? It was interesting to see it through BB's virgin perspective this time. DJT may truly be the Vito of our time. Please watch The Offer. Love you guys. I had said to Chris, actually, it must have been you, Beata Girl, who was talking about The Offer, maybe in the GART chat, but I have heard that there's, I don't know if it's a documentary or if it's fictional.
I think it's a documentary.
Like a dramatization, but yeah, about sort of the making of The Godfather. So we'll have to check that out for sure. But thank you for the generous boost.
Okay, and Burning Bright went ahead and pulled this up. So yes, just a reminder, we will be back next week, and we'll do The Godfather 3 and close this out. Now, there was the original version of The Godfather 3 that was released in 1990. And then much more recently, I think maybe even 2021 or 2022 or something, Francis Ford Coppola put out a new version that's, man, what do they call it? Like the Godfather Coda. Let me just see. Let me just make sure. And I was doing this yesterday, figuring out what I was just looking at the movie on Apple Movies, and I couldn't find Godfather 3, and it's called The Godfather Coda: The Death of Michael Corleone. So if you see that, that is the same film as Godfather 3. So do not be deterred or frustrated if you're unable to find Godfather 3. That is it. Andy Garcia is the new main character in that one. And okay, and with that, we will say goodnight. I'll see all of you very early for Badlands Daily. We'll be back next week for Godfather 3. Thank you all very much for hanging out in the chat, and we will see you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.